Good afternoon. Welcome to our work session. Today is Monday, February 23rd, 2026. It's approximately 1 p.m. I am Mayor Eric Enriquez. We'll start with a moment of silence. Yeah, if you'll join me in a moment of silence for our military personnel, our police and fire that protect us locally, and to all our city employees that provide the service they do for our city. If you'll join me in the pledge. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Okay, we'll go ahead and get started with our work session. Item number 1 on the agenda is Las Cruces Public Schools Community Schools Partnership Report.
All right.
Whenever you're ready, Karen.
Yes, good afternoon. I am not seeing the presentations on the screen, so I'm just going to pull it up real quick unless I'm missing something. What's that? I just put it in there. Usually I can see them. Sorry. I thought I was going to have to go to the city managers, but see, usually when I pull them up, I can see them there.
Because you're in the wrong.
There we go. Okay. Great. Here you go. Thank you very much. All right, good afternoon, Mayor and City Council. Carol Bray, Director of the Quality of Life Department, and I am here. We are bringing actually 2 partnerships to you today that of organizations that we work very closely with, and first is the Las Cruces Public Schools Community Schools Partnership that we participate in. Very pleased to, I have been participating in these meetings as a partner. We talk about what's happening with the community schools, all their wonderful programs and services, and how we contribute through our museum and library programs that we do jointly with them as well. Want to recognize that Councilor McClure is going to be the incoming vice chair, I believe, probably next month if all goes well. And also we want to thank Councilor Harris for his participation on the partnership board, and Mayor Enriquez has appointed himself to the partnership board, and we're very happy about that as well. I am pleased to introduce Johnny Rivera, who's the Community Schools Manager, and has been wonderful to work with over this past, year and a half or so that you've had the position. And he agreed to come and talk about, give you an update on what's happening with the Community Schools Partnership and all the wonderful things they're doing. So I will turn things over to Johnny, and you can just forward the, yes, it should work fine.
Good afternoon, everyone. Good afternoon, City Manager, Mayor, City Council members. Thank you for having me. It's a pleasure to be here and report out what's going on with our partnership that we've had over the last few years. Before I get started, I just want to say thank you to our first responders, to Chief Story and Chief McDaniels. Thank you, gentlemen, for your service. We appreciate you all and all the hard work you all do. So our meeting today, we will discuss community schools. Purpose today, really just want to give an education on what is a community school and the origin story. We'll talk about the history of community schools, how many school sites we have, along with the outputs and outcomes that we've identified as priorities for community schools, how we've been able to capture that information and data and talk about it in a practical sense. on top of strategic planning for the future of community schools. What is a community school? And a community school is a whole child comprehensive approach in how we address the whole child with supporting their learning outcomes, developing healthy relationships at a campus, but also supporting the staff and the family members that are part of our community schools. In addition to providing those academic components, we also want to provide resources and support systems for our families and for people of the community in case they need any types of supports or needs that they need addressed from the community that's not closely available to them in proximity, and provide them to the campuses that they're a part of. So what makes up a community school? Well, we have 6 key practices. And across the nation and across the state, we have either the 6 key practices or the 4 pillars of community schools. Here in New Mexico, here locally, we have the 6 key practices. And for us to implement these 6 key practices, we want to establish enabling conditions. And the enabling conditions we want to build in our campuses is developing trusting relationships with everyone that's a part of our campus. We also want to develop a shared vision with everyone that's participating with the campus, actionable data to talk about, and also develop inclusive decision-making platforms. Once we've established those, the climate for community schools, we can talk about the 6 key practices. And the first one I'll talk about is powerful student and family engagement. That piece is transitioning from a transactional relationship with our students and our families and transitioning into a co-creative space where our students and our families can come to a space together and develop the types of support systems they want to see on their campuses. The next one is collaborative leadership, shared power, and voice. This is truly just leaning into the democratic processes that our families should be a part of when we're thinking about bringing new systems to our campuses. The next one is expanded, culturally enriched learning opportunities. This is primarily our OST, or out-of-school time programming, so our after-school time. Here we have a strong partnership with 21st Century at NMSU, and our students and our families and our staff members work together to create after-school programming that our students want to see on our campuses, and I'll talk about what those are here in a little bit. Rigorous community-connected classroom instruction, that's our project-based learning. The City of Las Cruces and other partnerships throughout the city have a lot of opportunities that translate into the content that we're talking about in the classroom, and we'll talk about that here in a little bit as well. The culture of belonging, safety, and care. We do think about the literal sense of safety, care, and belonging, but we're talking about the climate here in our campus. Do our students feel comfortable and confident to navigate tough conversations on their campus as we would in real-world situations? And then lastly, integrated systems of support. What are those coordination of support systems that are developed on the campus? Do our students and staff members and our families understand the resources that are on our campus and available to them? And how do we navigate that? So community schools began in 2016 around Lynn Middle School. And as we all know, Lynn Middle School lives in an area that is highly impoverished. At the time, there was a lot of food insecurity, and there was also limited access to health care. So a group of individuals worked together with the campus and also worked together with public school leadership and developed and understood what community schools meant and what it could be at this campus. And so this is where we developed community schools, and everything community schools related really has developed from this campus. And now we've transitioned into other campuses, but this is where community schools first began in 2016. By 2018, community schools was taking off. It was developed quite robustly with Dr. Greenberg, and by 2018, he had developed a partnership with the City of Las Cruces, and we entered into a joint powers agreement, and the initiative between both entities is to support, sustain, and scale community schools over the years. Initially, the City of Las Cruces contributed $100,000 on an annual basis to support community schools, and that funding goes towards a community school coordinator FTE, and that funding still goes towards that community school coordinator at Booker T. Washington. The funding since then, in 2022, has been increased to $150,000 on an annual basis, and we still use that funding to support the community school coordinator position. We do expect that salaries are going to increase over the years. For the last few years, we've seen at least a 4% increase every year. And so while we were greatly appreciative of the funding, we do see that this is becoming a challenge to support new community school coordinators and expanding community schools throughout the city of Las Cruces. So a quick illustration of the growth and scaling of community schools over the years. you can see that essentially we've seen a campus become a community school, one campus every year since 2016 to 2025 become a community school. And so we see a larger population of community schools on the west side of town versus the east side of Las Cruces. But we now have Sunrise Elementary as the only campus on the east side of town that is a community school. These are our school sites, and I'll just talk through them real quick. Lynn Community Middle School, which began in 2017. We also have Booker T. Washington, that was developed in 2019. We have MacArthur and Doniana Elementary School that were developed in 2020. Alameda Elementary in 2021, Mesilla Park in 2022, Conley Elementary in 2023, and then Sunrise being the newest community school. As far as resources, we have a strong partnership with La Clinica de Familia. They operate as a spoke site or a hub site at our campuses, and the difference is a hub site is physical infrastructure at these school sites that provide medical and mental health resources on a regular basis at these school sites in a physical sense. And then we also have spoke sites which function in a telehealth virtual setting. So if someone is sick, they can check in with a virtual PA or a physician and describe what their symptoms are, and they can be diagnosed for whatever they're being seen for and receive treatment for whatever resources they need to seek out. During the year of 2025, from January 1 to 12/31 of 2025, there were over 2,000 patients that were seen at these sites. So it's been quite successful over the last couple of years. NMSU STEM Outreach, which is 21st Century, this is our OST programming. This content was co-created by students, staff members, and families through surveys, through anecdotal conversations. Students wanted to see Dungeons and Dragons as a class. They wanted to see math or literacy courses available to them. Also arts and crafts, how to ride a bike. We have after-school programming with the City of Las Cruces that gets students connected to soccer, to basketball, youth recreational programs that are usually not available to students that can't afford it. So this has been a challenge for a lot of our students at some of our campuses like MacArthur Elementary, Alameda Elementary, Conley Elementary, and the rest of our community schools, but these three campuses are the ones that really lean into the opportunities through grant funding right now to ensure that our students have the opportunity to participate in these resources. Additional partnerships that we have, honorable mentions, are Doniana Community College dental programs. We have two campuses where our hygiene students from these programs at DACC come to these campuses to provide hygiene care and hygiene education to our students and their siblings. Casa de Mi Alma, which provides mental health resources that kind of fill the gaps that La Clinica de Familia doesn't have the capacity to fill with the frequency of students that need those supports. Boys and Girls Club, Big Brothers and Big Sisters provide OST support for mentorship programming for the students that need that kind of support in the after-school hours. And the Lions Club provide glasses for those students that tend to lose them. Their dog takes their glasses, they step on them, they break them, they lose them, it falls between the cracks of the car. This is just another opportunity to help support our students in the way they need. Las Cruces Public Schools, part of the strategic plan is to decrease chronic absenteeism by 50%. Of course, we only have 8 community schools that can help that area, but we have seen a sizable decrease, a mentionable decrease in chronic absenteeism. Since 2021, during the pandemic, and then exiting out of the pandemic, we continue to see a general decrease in chronic absenteeism. At the beginning of 2021, our chronic absenteeism rate on average was approximately 35–36%. And as we get closer to 2026, we see it trending down closer to that 30% mark. Of course, each campus is very different. We're going to see an ebb and flow. Things are very different for each campus. There's rhymes and reasons for all of that. But building a culture around positive relationships and leaning into the resources that we have available to these students and their families have had a positive effect on chronic absenteeism over an extended period of time. Some of the outcomes that I think are worth mentioning, again, are positive culture, inclusive decision-making, social emotional support strategies, and incentivizing attendance, being at our campuses. So once our students realize that we're not just here for handouts, we're not just here for a discount at our local restaurant or receiving a free slice of pizza, we're here for positive relationships. We're here for meaningful relationships. We're here to learn how to navigate tough conversations, and we're here to obviously get an education and thrive beyond our educational system. And community schools has been able to do that over time. Some of the other outputs worth highlighting: after-school programming. When you combine all of our community schools together, we are close to 1,500 students of all of our community schools. And for our OST programming, we have close to 1,300 students that are participating in after-school programs. So we have close to almost 100% students that are participating in the OST programs. And as far as wraparound services, medical, mental health resources, food bank distributions, dental hygiene programs, and other family engagement events that provide some sort of service to our families and to our students, we have close to 2,000 students and families that connect with those resources. Family engagement is also a piece that the Las Cruces Public School District is focusing on, and we have close to 4,000 participants on an annual basis participating with these events, not to just promote transactional things and getting stuff to parents and to family members, but also building those strong relationships, which is obviously important. Strategic planning. So as we all know, government funding is quite volatile right now. We have support, obviously, through the City of Las Cruces. We also have support from the Department of Education Full Service Community School Grant. And we also have federal funding from the State of New Mexico through New Mexico Public Education Department. And while this funding is obviously very beneficial and it supports what we're trying to do and continue the work that we're doing, it becomes a challenge because we are not very certain with what funding is going to look like in the next year or two. Last year during February, there was a moratorium that went out to all of the federal schools that are funded by the Department of Education. That funding was going to halt, and that was obviously altered by the Supreme Court later that day. And so the environment that we live in right now is, there's a lot of uncertainty, and so we've had to sidestep and think creatively and do a lot of asset mapping throughout the community. And one asset that we have that is glaring at us is our partnership with New Mexico State University. The College of Hest is a strong partnership that we have with Dr. Rick Marlett. One opportunity that we see together is building an internship opportunity to have interns come into our campuses, support our community school coordinators in the campus, and our community school coordinators that are funded currently, we can transition them into growing campuses and continue to grow the community schools initiative throughout the City of Las Cruces. But to do that, we need to build a strong system with our partnership with NMSU first. Outside of that, we'll continue to expand our partnerships and seek out other grants, of course, throughout the community, locally, regionally, on a national level. And so I want to thank you all for the support that you all have generously offered to us over the years. I would open up an opportunity later in the future to discuss future funding to support community schools. It is going to be a challenge in the years to come to support and continue to support our community school coordinators over time, but as of today, I just want to say thank you for all the hard work you all do for us and supporting us. Greatly appreciated. But that is all I have. If anyone has any questions, I'll remain standing and answer any of those questions or concerns.
Thank you so much, Johnny, and we'll stand for any questions.
Okay, thank you. Councilor McClure?
Thank you, Mayor. I'm still new to the gig, so I'm going to ask this question. How do you work with our Parks and Rec department for some of the out-of-school time?
Thank you. Good question. City Manager, Mayor, and Councilor McClure. One of those ways is really just a direct relationship with them. One of my neighbors used to work for Parks and Rec, and I would just go knock on his door and say, hey, listen, can we do this partnership with you all? We have this after-school program idea. Can we do this? And it's as simple as that. It's just calling somebody directly. And I'm not familiar with staffing right now, but our coordinators do that. Our community school coordinators is that direct contact with people throughout city government, and they reach out to the Parks and Recs department, explain what they would like to see, and try to make it happen.
Thank you. I'm just curious if we can support them with more funding. I know what our budget looks like right now, but that 4% might be something we could talk about in future. But I'm also thinking about the swim program that we asked for support at the legislature, and it didn't actually come through. But if it's something that we could kind of merge together and give kids an opportunity to learn how to swim and give that support also financially, I think that would be a great collaboration, especially with our great pool. So thank you.
Thank you, ma'am.
Thank you. Councilor Matisse?
Again, thank you for the presentation. I think it's so vitally important because of the emphasis we need to give on youth programs. Sure. And so this is excellent. And again, thank you, Carol, and the library for the partnership and the other partnerships. I'm trying to look at the next 2 years that I sit on this city council is the impact. In other words, when you spend $1 million, how many people are you reaching? Or you spend 150,000, you're reaching thousands of children. And sometimes we spend, $20, $30 million, and maybe it only impacts 50 or 60 people. And that makes for a very tight budget. Whereas when you spend on the library, you spend on youth programs, you spend it on public safety, you spend it on roads, you're reaching thousands of people. You're making their lives better in a large volume. And so I really support anything we can take from our budget and give to this program. I really support it wholeheartedly, and thanks for your effort, and both of you, and thanks for the presentation.
Thank you, Councilor.
Thanks. Councilor Harris.
Thanks, Mayor. So I'm excited to be on the advisory board and to learn more and help out going forward in the future. There's 2 community schools in District 3, and they're great resources for the people who live there. I like that Lynn kicked it all off. And something that stood out to me that in one of our previous conversations when I was getting introduced was that the interaction with the students and getting their thoughts on specifically safety around their school. And what struck me about that conversation was that they seemed to have different thoughts than all of the rest of us might have expressed in the past. And so that's very interesting, and I look forward to that kind of engagement, at that level. And then another thing that I wanted to mention, when we were in Santa Fe, we were talking about after-school programs, community schools, the whole general idea. And something that one of the legislators brought up was that we need to have activities, actually, specifically not activities, but facilities that are open to kids to just be there. So we talk a lot about having after-school programs and arts and crafts activities and sports and things for them to do. But what this conversation was about is we need to also recognize that some kids just need a place to go and exist. And maybe they're scrolling on their phone or whatever and sitting in the corner and not talking to somebody, but they're there, and that's helpful. And if they want to engage later, they can engage. So I just want to make sure that when we're discussing activities, and I think I was talking about this at the board meeting too with some people afterwards, and I think they're on it. But, just be open to not everything has to be an activity. We don't have to gather data from a survey from every kid right at the outset. Otherwise, yeah, I absolutely in support. I think this is a great program. I think it's really thinking outside the box on how we do community engagement. Back in the past, the schoolhouse was like one of the centers of the community, and I like that we're bringing that back.
Thank you, Councilor Harris.
Councilor Brinkhoma.
Hi, thank you so much for joining us today. That was really informative presentation. I just have a couple of follow-up questions for you. On the absenteeism chart you showed us, I thought that was really powerful information. I'm curious if you all have further data on that. I'm just very curious about what are the kinds of things leading to absenteeism, if you have those sort of in categories recorded.
I can talk about that right now.
That'd be great, yeah.
Sure. Okay. City Manager, Mayor, Councilor McComo. One of the projects that we've done, and I think it's important to point out with community schools that is inherent to only community schools, is the ability to connect with students on a more intimate level, on a more grounded level. One of the research items that we did with Lynn Middle School was we asked a group of students why they're not coming to school, why they are coming to school, and what resources they would need to stay at school. So the reasons they were not coming to school was violence. The reason they were not coming to school is because of separation within the household, death in families, either to violence, but also to COVID at the time of the pandemic, but also the need for mental health resources to support them. And so when we talked about why they were coming to school, they were talking about positive relationships at the campus. They have a teacher that they're just really close to, or friends, a strong social circle on the campus that they feel supported on their campus. And then also they felt safe on the campus. This was the one space, like Mr. Counselor Harris touched on, this was one space that they can come to and not have to worry about anything other than just being at school. And so when I asked about other resources to help support them, we talked about all of the resources that we provide as a community school. And so we realized, like, hey, maybe we should just educate them a little bit more about the resources, and this might help out with our chronic absenteeism rate. But this is something that translates with all of our campuses across our community schools, at least.
Wow, thank you for sharing that.
Yes,
And
ma'am.
when you say violence, it was violence at home, not violence at school.
So, good, yeah, clarifying question for sure. Thank you, Councilor Percomo. One of them is gun violence. Gun violence in the community. We had a student that was in ISS, and I went and poked my head in there and talked to him and asked him why he was in ISS, and found out that really the root cause wasn't that he was just acting out to act out. He had lost a cousin due to gun violence in the community, and he didn't know how to manage his emotions for that instance, and ended up acting out in a way that ended up in ISS. So we connected him with other resources to ensure that he feels supported on the campus. And then obviously we have other instances near the campus that have taken place since then, Youngs Park. And so connecting with those students in a group session and just giving them that time and space to connect with them and to let them know, hey, we want to hear what your thoughts are. And all they said to us really was, we just want to know what's going on. And that was it. And so for me, that's where we should start, is just giving them a platform to talk and speak and to be treated like people. And they are, and we treat them as people. But I think community schools is that function where we can make those changes and have those conversations with students.
Wow, thank you. Perfect segue. Literally, my second question was going to be about gun violence education. And I'm curious I think community schools would be such a perfect place to engage in that kind of work, right? I know that the newly revamped DARE program is out there. I am curious about what kind of gun violence or violence diversion education is happening at community schools, or if you'd be open to those kinds of partnerships in the future.
Councilor Percomo, absolutely, we'd be open to it. I think community schools, as I mentioned earlier, is a democratic platform. Our traditional schools, we have student government, and when you think about a high school and how many members are involved, you might have 50 members in a student council, student government, and that's not representative of 5% of the student population. When we talk about community schools, we pull out more students into different committees, and we have a stronger engagement with our students and give them a platform so they can truly talk about what they feel comfortable talking about. And something as delicate as gun violence, I think it's very important to have that strong relationship and bond with our students before we could tackle something that heavy.
Yeah, and it's really important, I think, given the alarming trends we've been seeing in the last year, certainly. But I think it's so important, and I'm really glad that we have this partnership with you all. I think community schools are really vital to our community and the success of our kids. So thank you so much. I appreciate it.
Thank you, Counselor.
Mayor Pro Tem.
Thank you, Mayor, City Councilors. Carol and Mr. Rivera, thank you very much for the information and the partnership. Truly appreciate it, and I appreciate the work that you're doing. So there's about 1,335 students in the cultural enrichment program. There's roughly 24,000, maybe 25,000 students district-wide, I would say. And you may or may not have the answer now, but I would love to hear what initiatives or what ideas you have to expand that. How can we work together between the city of Las Cruces and our public school system to increase our net for student services with the after-school program?
Thank you. City Manager, Mayor Pro Tem, and City Council members. To answer the question, after-school programming has been also in the climate of volatility when it comes to grant funding. And so with our partnership with NMSU, there has been a year-to-year basis over the last couple of years on what our funding is going to look like. I do think that we need to find sustainable ways to fund these programs because, for example, at one of our campuses, we have 33 programs. And if we lost our funding, and we lost 33 programs. We could do the math of 33 times about approximately 20 students. It's a lot of students that now don't really have anywhere to go, and then they also don't have the programs that they designed, and so we lose that ownership and buy-in from our students and giving them that space that they deserve. As far as expanding at a district level, that is a question for Dr. Wendy Miller-Tomlinson, who I'd be glad to sit down and talk with. But I do think that the conversations begin at our Community Schools Partnership Board meeting, and it's great to have the council members that we have here, and now the mayor is going to be joining us, to have those discussions, and that's where it begins, sir.
Thank you.
I'd like to add something. Carol Bray, Director of the Quality of Life Department, Mayor Pro Tem. What I'd like to add from the city's perspective is that I attend all the partnership board meetings, and so do several of my staff. We have, at any monthly meeting, we have 1 or 2 people from the museums and from the library outreach teams. Currently, our museums are doing programs in the schools already. I believe it's 2nd grade right now that they're working with. Yeah, so they have a curriculum they've developed for 2nd graders. Our libraries come to many of the community school outreach events that they'll have, and we're looking at ways internally across our department that we can do more to provide after-school programming, and certainly we'll consult with Johnny and with his team about how we could do that in a way that would be useful to the community and to the schools as well. Thanks.
Wonderful. Thank you. Thank you, Mayor.
All right, well, thank you. Thank you for the presentation. Thank you for the update. I look forward to serving on the board and being a part of, throughout the United States, there's different charters and different ways of doing things. There's some areas where the schools are under the city and the mayor and the council, and there's others that are run by the state as we are. A lot of times we feel that there's nothing we can do about it because it's not under our purview. But the truth of the matter is working together, being a community. So it's fitting that they're community schools so that we can work together as a community and take care of our community. This is great. This is a great step forward. And we need to get NMSU involved as well. As you said, building that relationship for our community is what's going to make it succeed. So thank you.
Thank you, Mayor.
Appreciate it. Thank you again, Johnny. We appreciate you.
Next on the agenda is item 1.2, Amador Hotel update and Amador Hotel Foundation report. I know we have Garland that'll be, or Carol, starting it off, and I know we have some members of the public in the Amador Association, Ms. Pollard, that would like to probably say a few words, but we also have in attendance today, we have Senator Hamlet, and feel free when you'd like to say a few words. I know you've been a big advocate for it, and we appreciate it. So we can start out, but we wanted to recognize you and say thank you for being here. And we also have former Councilor Greg Smith here, also a part, so thank you for joining us.
All right, good afternoon again, Mayor and Council. Carol Bray, Quality of Life Director for the record, and we are here to give you an update on the Amador Hotel progress. This has been a major renovation and restoration of this historic hotel. And as the Mayor mentioned, I do have Garland Courts here with me, who's the Deputy Director for Museums, who is working with me and with the Amador Hotel Foundation, as well as the Public Works Department on this project. It's getting very exciting now that we actually have some additional funding to make this project happen, and we'll talk about that during this presentation. Also, of course, the Mayor recognized Senator Hamlin, who's here. She has been a major proponent of this project, but I also want to introduce Heather Pollard, who's the president of the Amador Hotel Foundation, as well as Deb Dennis, who works with us, meets with us monthly for our Amador Hotel Foundation meetings. So, and we have kind of a cast of dozens, as you mentioned, here supporting the Amador Hotel, who have been interested in the project over the decades that we've been working on it. So I'm going to give a little bit of background on this project. There is way more, maybe more than you ever dreamed of in the packet, in the council packet, but we wanted to let you know just how much work has gone into determining what to do with the Amador Hotel. This building belonged to the Amador family, and over a century ago, probably about 1882, Martin Amador remodeled what was then, excuse me, a one-story building and at the corner of Water Street and Amador Avenue to serve as the first post office for Las Cruces, jail, and temporary courthouse. So a lot was happening in that structure. Once the permanent county courthouse was completed, then Amador remodeled his building again in 1885 to be a two-story hotel and theater. And it operated that way for the next 83 years until 1968. This building shows the facility in about 1936, this particular picture. And then, time took its toll on the facility. It was sold, remodeled, and reopened as Citizens Bank in 1970. Later served as the Doña Ana County's manager complex after the bank moved in 1983. But then by 2006, the property had really fallen silent, and there was not a plan for it at the time. However, the city acquired it from the county, and relatively soon after that, we began talking about what we might do with this historic hotel. And so in 2009, there was a lot of work on a reuse plan that was completed by Kells and Craig Architects in November of 2009, and that led to a council resolution in December 2009 that called for these aspects of the hotel, that it's a uniquely important cultural and historic icon, anchors Main Street, serves as a gateway to a revitalized downtown that, of course, we're still working on, provides a social destination, which it was quite the social place in its heyday, also will foster economic development through heritage tourism. And I want to mention also that throughout all these years, we've worked closely with the Amador Hotel Foundation. Back then, they were called the Amador Museum Foundation, and there is going to be an important museum aspect to this project. So I'm going to pass the mic to Garland now so that he can talk a little bit about the vision for the Amador Hotel.
Good afternoon, Garland Courts, Deputy Director for Quality of Life. Mayor and City Council, good to speak to you. Just going to talk to you a little bit about our vision for once it's completed and restoration is completed. What we're looking at, and we're basing almost all of this on the 2009 reuse plan that Carol had mentioned. We're looking at the 1930s period, get it to a good place in history where we can really showcase the strong points of the building and how it was used by the city. Different things that we could do within the building that will reflect the history are we can have a couple of the rooms could be changed into period pieces to show what it looked like, what one of the rooms would look like. It'll actually have some we can have some interactives in there that can show interpretation of the building, how the family used it, and also how people that came to visit Las Cruces saw the building. So as we use it in future, it could be an event center. It will have room for office spaces. And with the event center, you could host dignitaries that come into town for special events. Important announcements, things like that. I mean, if you look at our downtown, we've got an awesome, city hall here. It's new. It shows what we can do in the future, how we support the city now. But on the other end of Main Street, you've got a wonderful historic establishment that shows that the city cares about its history. It understands where it comes from, and just reflects how the city really takes pride in itself. The other point was for the museum space and interpretation. We have current staff that can work on decorating or rehabbing a couple of rooms and really kind of showcase what Las Cruces is all about. I think that's good.
Thank you, Garland. And I want to just give a little update on the construction. We are not the experts on that, but we've been working closely with Public Works on the construction, and we're preparing to go out for bid now for the remainder of Phase 2 of the construction, which you can see this photo actually shows the banner that's on the west wall of the Amador Hotel right now. If you are driving down Amador towards the hotel, you'll see this banner has our website there, and there's an update on the website that we keep current in terms of what's happening with the project. And so for Phase 2, which is scheduled to begin in May of 2026, we're looking at restoration and associated structural repairs of the remaining exterior walls. We currently have finished the walls on the east side, and those look very nice. You can get an idea of what that looks like if you go by the building. And then also we have reconstruction of the territorial period portico at the main entrance, as well as the hotel sign. And if we go back to this rendering, you can see the sign was quite iconic up here on top of the building, and that sign will come back, so we're excited about that. This is our project schedule, essentially, for the remainder of the construction. First, as I mentioned, Phase 2, beginning in May, roughly, once we complete the RFP process to bring a contractor on board. Likely finishing around November 2026. As I mentioned, this includes the portico, the signage, some work on the roof, other historical features, repairing the exterior walls, and structural work. And then Phase 3 will begin roughly November or December 2026. We're saying right now to November 2027, but we're hoping it might be a little sooner than that, because the grant we received, which I'll talk about in a minute, is a 2-year grant. Phase 3, though, will include improving the first floor interior, building the catering kitchen, some landscaping. And what's exciting about this is we did not have the funding for Phase 3, but now we do. And so I'll talk about that in this next slide. I just want to mention, first of all, that Phase 4 is not yet funded. That will be for improving the second floor spaces of the interior. So we'll be working on that next. But we received, as I think you've all been informed, the Capital Development Program Fund grant for $4.8 million and some change. This allows us to renovate the first floor interior. This scene you're seeing here is a rendering from the west, where that banner I showed you now hangs. This shows where the patio will be. That's going to be a really lovely space and sort of evocative of the patio that used to be at the Amador Hotel. We even have one of the original tables and chairs from the old patio, so we can replicate those and make it look like it did back in the day. But this grant also allows us to combine some aspects of Phases 2 and 3, which will save us some funding. And so will allow us to open the facility a little earlier than we anticipated, and also to the public for the first time in many years. So we have a picture we'll show you of a big gathering there in 2012, but it's been some years since the facility was open to the public. All right, and in fact, there's the photo right there, and I'm going to turn things over to Heather Pollard, who is the president of the Amador Hotel Foundation.
Thank you, Mayor and Council. I think I'm here to really thank so many people, and this is a very emotional time. It's been 20 years, and there are so many people in this room that have really helped us. David Cedillo, thank you so much. It is my honor to be the president of the Amador Foundation. It's been an experience to be a part of this amazing project. I'd like to introduce some of the board members who are present. And I'm not sure who all has walked in, but Dr. Deb Dennis, Patrick Lamb, Monica Guzman, Greg Smith, Jean Fulton, Peggy Smith, Phyllis Franzoy. Dr. Dennis, Dr. Sonia Cooper, and Jean Fulton have worked tirelessly for 2 decades on this project. This was the dream when we opened Main Street. And I think many of you know that I was very involved with the opening of Main Street. And I believe, Mayor Matisse, were you involved in the, when?
I don't want to go back that many years, but yes, I was.
Well,
Thank you.
we partnered together for many,
We did.
many years. At this point, too, I have to recognize Senator Mary Kay Papin. Mary Kay, would you stand up, please? I have worked with Senator Papin for the past 30 years, starting with building La Casa, opening Main Street, the Rio Grande Theater, the Plaza. She has been my mentor, my teacher, and I think we have been honored in our community to have this woman serve, and she's continuing to serve on the Taylor site, and it's wonderful to work with her again. I'd like to thank Carol Bray and her Quality of Life staff, Rebecca Slaughter, Garland Courts, Shri. I see Shri is in the back. As I say, this is a pretty emotional time, 20 years. There were many times when we really did not believe this was going to happen. And it was always part of our dream that this building would anchor the downtown, and we would have school children coming through and walking over to the plaza and being part of that, and then walking down to the Brannigan Cultural Center and the museums. And I felt like I was probably not ever going to see this happen because as years went by, I thought, well, maybe they'll just put my ashes on Main Street and we won't get the Amador Hotel open. But I think this is going to be a dream for all of us. I really do want to thank Carol Bray. Quality of Life has adopted us. We would invite those of you who have not been in the Amador Hotel to take a guided tour. Dr. Dennis is a wonderful tour guide. So I think, did you want to open for questions, Carol? Or I can answer any questions. Okay. Thank you.
Right. Yes, we just have one more slide, and that's next steps. Carol Bray, again, for the record, for the hotel. As I mentioned, we're working on constructing phase 2 starting in May. We are finalizing a memorandum of understanding with the foundation, which we haven't had in some time, and that is just about finished with the help of our legal department. We'll be implementing the community or the capital development program fund grant for phase 3 and seeking funding for phase 4. And at this point, we are looking at potentially opening the facility by, I would say, FY 2029. So we'll be thinking about that in terms of budget and what we'll need to operate it. We have, as Garland mentioned, a lot of talented staff in the museums. This will probably be part of the museum portfolio since they're the ones that are so knowledgeable about historic buildings and museum exhibits. So we want to stand for questions, but I also understand that Senator Hamlin would like to address the council. So Mayor, if that's possible. Oh, she says no. Okay. All right. So Heather has one more thing to say. Go ahead, Heather.
Last year, when we really were in sort of despair, we went to Senator Hamlin and said, what can we do about the building? And she guided us to a grant that we were not aware of. And so with the help of the city grants department and Jean Fulton and Deb Dennis, Carol and I keep saying it's a miracle. We can't really believe it. And it is. It's truly been a miracle. So Senator Hamlin, thank you so very much.
All right, Mayor, that is the end of our presentation. We will now stand for any questions you and the council might have.
All right, thank you, Carol. Councilor Bicom.
Thanks, Mayor. Thank you both for the lovely presentation. I just have a couple of questions regarding funding. Carol, do you have the numbers for the total amount of public funds that have been invested to date?
We have spent approximately $7 million, I believe, at this time. The phase we're getting into now, finishing up phase 2, is another $3 million. And then we have the $4.8 million for phase 3. And then I believe phase 4 is going to be another $3 million. So is that about 21 million altogether? It'll be, right? So, or no, not quite, 17? 17 million. So, and that number fluctuates because, of course, it's a very old building, and as we get in there, we sometimes find that we need more than we thought we needed for certain aspects. I know that we have discussed this quite a bit with Public Works, and Sri Devi Mohanraj is here. I don't know if she wants to add anything to that, but that's where we are right now.
So far,
We've spent about 7 million, a little over 7 million.
Okay.
And then we're adding the 3 million that we already have. Then most of that's come from TID funding to do the remainder of phase 2. So that puts us at about 10. We've got this additional 4.8, so that's almost 15 plus 3 for the remainder of phase, what would be phase 4. So that's about 18 million.
okay.
Yeah.
Okay,
All
thank
right.
you,
Sure.
Carol. And then for the phases you have planned out, how much currently do you have secured?
So as I said, we have enough that should get us through most of phase 3, enough to open the facility to the public
Okay,
at this point. And basically that'll be 14.8 million that we will have spent then once we spend that money. And then we'll really just be looking for the remaining funding for the second floor interior. And that's all we lack. And we can open the facility. A lot of what is needed on the second floor, I believe it's going to be, a lot of drywall and paint. I think they're doing some of the structural work as part of phase 2.
okay.
So
4.8 million from a grant,
Yes.
which congratulations, that's excellent. And then the other 3 million that you noted is additional TID money.
is mostly TID money, yes.
Okay,
Yes.
thank you.
There was some additional legislative funding we got for this, but that's been spent already.
Okay.
Yeah.
And then have you all come up with a plan or an approximate proposal for operational funding and what that will be per year?
We're working on that now, given that we've got 3 years probably before we'll be able to open. We have a little time, but we'll want to have it ready, obviously, by fiscal year 2028 so that we are ready to roll that into our budget proposal. But what we're doing right now, Garland and I have been talking about who from the museums could serve as a liaison to this project beyond us, because we're not always as available as when they might need someone. And then we also, with our museums team and all across the department, once we are operational, we are very skilled at holding events and holding programs and conducting tours and knowing, as he mentioned, how to create a museum exhibit space. So we're going to be able to rely a lot on the team we already have within the Quality of Life Department. We only envision a staff, I would say, of 3 to 4 people, most likely.
Okay. Thank you, Carol, for that
Sure.
information. I have to be very honest. I hope that the remaining funds for the remaining portion, the phases that are not secured yet, that I hope they do come from grants. I feel like given the state of the budget and given the state of the infrastructure emergency that we currently have in the city with firehouses and municipal court and those kinds of things, that we should definitely be focusing our investments on some of those emergencies. And, I think at this point, we're nearing about $15 million of public dollars. And I'm not saying it's not important. I'm just saying that I really hope that, the foundation and all of the folks are prepared to, go try to find those kinds of more grants in order to support this project and in order to supplement the investment that the city has already made. That's just at least my perspective and where I'm coming from, given what I hope we are funding in the future and how I hope we are addressing the infrastructure emergency that we currently have in the city. So thank you.
Councilor Harris.
Thanks, Mayor. So I also echo some of the budget concern. I think it's a great and important project. I'm new. All this happened way before my time, so I appreciate that. I look forward to going and seeing the building. I drive past it every day, and I see the progress, and it looks exciting, and I'm excited for what it can become and be this anchor to downtown. So to that end, I was wondering what does this look like as like an everyday integration to the space? I saw the courtyard, and it looks like there's cool plans there. I'm struggling a little to visualize it in my head how it dovetails with the Visit building and the Amador Live. But is this envisioned to be open every day that people can go? Like there'll be a little cafe or something that you can to draw people in. That's not necessarily just event based. So can you speak a little more towards that plan? I know it's not
Sure.
for another 4 years, but.
Right, yeah, Mayor and Councilor Harris, some of that I can respond to, some of that we don't have the plan for yet. We don't have a plan for a cafe per se, there is a plan for a catering kitchen. The plan is to, yes, hold events there, but, we also have talked a lot, and I believe the Amador Hotel Foundation is in agreement with us about basically making sure we have the museum space, that we have space that explains how important this space is to Las Cruces, that we can bring the many students that tour our museums now, bring them there, help them understand one of the earliest important historic spaces in our city that still exists, right? And what Las Cruces was like back then. We've talked about having moonlight at the Amador, like we have moonlight at the museum, so that we can have adult events there. We've talked about also recreating the days when apparently, and I've heard Irene Oliver Lewis talk about this, our local actress, semi-retired actress perhaps, talk about as a child remembering going and being in that parlor, and there were singing and dancing and performances going on, and with the talent we have locally here, we could recreate that as a sort of a parlor space, which I think is very exciting for our community. So there's a lot of possibilities, and in fact that Craig and Kells and Craig plan does outline some of that. We don't think we'll need to focus as much on the event space aspect of it, but it would be available for rental for events as well.
Okay. Yeah, that's great. I like that we're looking to kind of bring more mass and density of museums, and I like the thinking that you can make a whole day out of your field trip by taking kids there and then working your way down Main Street. That's a fun idea.
Yeah,
so,
absolutely. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks. Looking forward to getting it finished and getting some events.
All right, thanks.
Anyone else? Senator Hamlin, you come on up.
Thank you so much, Mr. Mayor and Council, and I've been talking a lot lately and wasn't really intending on doing that, but I wanted to give a little bit of background about the $4.8 million grant that was received. The Department of Finance and Administration has 5 new people on staff now that their sole job is to find these pockets of money that are going to projects like this. And so I do want to give credit to my assistant, my district legislative aide, Andre Gonzalez, who was instrumental in really working with the Amador Foundation and DFA to try and find that money. And I recognize Councilor Bencomo's concerns and Councilor Harris's concerns about where are we putting this money and understand the challenges that you have as a city government. So I wanted to just make sure to commit to you that that's what Andre will continue to do, is to help find those pockets of money to help do this, because I recognize there are other things that really need to take priority when we talk about public safety. But I also feel that this is the last cog in downtown, especially since you all were successful in that eyesore of a building getting leveled, that when we look at downtown and really the vibrancy that we are able to have with downtown, I feel that this is the last piece. So that is why I feel it's something that's really important. And so Andre will continue to work with the foundation to try and find those monies, to try and do that so that you can put your budget money to where it really is needed. So I do appreciate you all considering that, and thank you very much for all the hard work from city staff and from the Amador Foundation for really trying to get this gem. I do strongly encourage to try and go and see it, just the history there. My brother's mother-in-law stayed there in the 50s when they were coming down to start their life while her husband was working at White Sands. And so they had fond memories of that hotel, and I know that there are many people who are still in our communities who have very fond memories. So I appreciate all the efforts, and thank you all very much for your support on this. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Senator Hamlin. We appreciate all your efforts and your work in helping the foundation out. Anyone else? Okay, well, thank you, and I want to say we all up here have that challenge of where's the funding coming from, and we're always looking at those things. But this is something when we look at return on investment, we can also look at the return on value, the intangible part that it offers the city of Las Cruces and the history that's so valuable to many of us here in Las Cruces, and that's what it provides. So, Ms. Pollard, thank you for all your work and for continuing over 20 years to help this project and the Amador Hotel continue and to open up its doors again. So,
Okay.
thank you all.
Thank you, Mayor and Council.
Next on the agenda is item 1.3, the 9th semi-annual police audit report presented by the OIR group. Viola, whenever you're ready.
Good afternoon, Mr. Mayor, councilors. My name is Viola Perea, City Auditor, and today we have the OIR group with us to present their 9th semi-annual police audit report. So I'd like to introduce our presenters today. We have Ms. Teresa Magula and Mr. Stephen Connolly.
Good afternoon, Mr. Mayor, City Manager, some new faces this afternoon. My name is Teresa Magula. I am with OIR Group. I have my colleague Stephen Conley with me today. We have been presenting before this body for the past 5 years, and we're grateful to be back for our 9th semi-annual report. I'm going to kick it over to Steve, who will do some introductions of the work that we do both in your city and nationwide, to give you a perspective of where we come from, and then we'll dive into our semi-annual report and our findings.
Do we do the click? 50-50 chat. There we go. Good afternoon, everybody, and thank you for having us. Steve Conley of OIR Group, and as Teresa said, we're very happy to be back in touch in Las Cruces for one of our periodic visits to your city. So, particularly for the audience members or our new councilors, Mayor Pro Tem, I want to talk a little bit about us very briefly. OIR Group is based out of Southern California. We have a core group of 4 folks, but Teresa and I are the leads here in Las Cruces. And we have a number of years of work in the field of police practices. We do a lot of work in California, but several other states as well, and we perform a variety of functions just depending on how the oversight models are set up in the particular jurisdictions. So this is our 5th year. We're coming up on 5 full years here in Las Cruces, and this is the 9th report that we've had the opportunity to present to your council. And the report is about 30 pages long, and it's got some very lengthy appendices as far as the individual case memos, which is one of the distinctive features of the model here in Las Cruces. We have written up summaries and analyses of every single complaint case that crosses our desk in the period of time that the audit is covering. So this presentation is really just meant to be a supplement to the written report that is publicly available, so we welcome the public to read it, and it's obviously an opportunity to engage with you folks in person as well, which we're happy to do. So, in terms of the scope of the audit and our scope of work a little bit more generally, the material in this particular report is covering completed cases into allegations of potential officer misconduct that were investigated and then closed by Las Cruces Police Department. So they conduct the investigations, it's their internal affairs process, and when those cases are done, we are notified and we have the opportunity to review the department's investigative memo and just as importantly, all of the evidence that went into the department's decision-making for the particular case. So under our relationship with the city, we have access to all the body-worn camera recordings, all the police reports, documentation, photographs, any interviews that took place and are recorded. We have the opportunity to review those. And the goal is to basically assess the quality of the department's investigation. Is it objective? Is it fair? Is it thorough? Are they covering all the allegations? And are they reaching outcomes that are reasonable and supported by the evidence? And so we have the opportunity to kind of weigh in after the fact on the department's process, and also importantly to make recommendations based on what we are seeing in the individual cases, and encourage the department to make adjustments either in terms of its processes, or if we see something substantive from the case itself, we might make a recommendation to the department about the underlying conduct and encourage the department to address it in a new way. So along with the misconduct cases that are kind of the meat and potatoes of our work, I also just want to briefly touch on a couple of other things that are part of our scope, one of them being closed litigation. That's something that we also report on when a case alleging some sort of lawsuit, claim or lawsuit against the city has made it through the litigation process and is finished. We have an opportunity to review that incident to assess the department's response to it, and if there are any lessons to be learned, accountability, adjustments to policies or procedures. We're going to be looking at that whole thing from kind of a different perspective to see if the department has responded to the litigation and the issues raised by the litigation in a constructive way. As it happens, there were not any closed litigation cases during this particular period, so we don't have any of those reports in this particular installment of our work here. And then the other thing that the city has asked us to do, dating back to 2021, is to take a look at some of the demographic issues. So the report contains some specific statistics on the demographic background of both complainants and involved officers. There's also information shared about the zip codes, the origins of the particular complaints. And the idea behind that 5 years ago was just to say, hey, this is something that we can count and we can evaluate it from the city's perspective and obviously in terms of our work, and look to see if there are any disparities that are jumping out at us, that a group seems to be overrepresented, or there's an oddly significant proportion of one demographic background versus another, and is there anything to be gleaned from that? As we have said pretty much every time, and this is again our 9th report, we take a look at that question very seriously, because obviously the issue of disparities, in particular racial disparities in policing, has been a nationwide concern, and understandably so for many years. Here in Las Cruces, the complaints are obviously a pretty narrow window in order to evaluate policing and disparity sorts of issues. The number of complaints compared to the number of police contacts is a tiny, tiny fraction, so the sample size is truly small. Having said that, we can also tell you that in each of our individual 9 reports, we have not found any statistically significant, noteworthy takeaways, I guess, from the statistical analysis that we have done. But as I say, the particulars and the specific counting is something that we absolutely will do and continue to do, and it's featured in the report itself. So, as far as the cases that we looked at during this time period, we looked at a total of 12 internal investigations, and that means these were generated by department management itself, as opposed to being started by a complaint from a member of the public. Here there were 12 cases, which was the majority of the work that we did during this 6-month stretch. One of the cases involved an officer-involved shooting and again, that not necessarily an implication of misconduct here or an allegation of misconduct, as we see in most of the complaints and cases that we look at. But with the officer-involved shootings, those are automatically going to be subjected to a higher level of internal review, and the department is going to look at those things administratively to assess officer performance, along with the criminal investigation that occurs into the legality of the officer's actions, The department's also going to look at it and say, are these people following our policies? Are they following our training? And it's conceivable that a particular incident could be legally justified and there's no criminal implications, but the department says we have a policy-related concern and we're going to remediate the officer accordingly. So Teresa will talk about that case a little bit later in the presentation. 3 of the incidents that we looked at involved off-duty allegations of misconduct, and this is always a significant part of I guess, police accountability in the sense that the police officers are police officers 24 hours a day. And so even when they're off duty, there are certain behavioral expectations and standards that the department holds them to as part of its administrative process. And 3 of the cases that we looked at arose from conduct that occurred when the officers were off duty. 2 of the cases we looked at arose from vehicle pursuits. The department, met with the department this morning and talked about just statistically how many pursuits they have in a given year and what the standards are and how those get reviewed. As I'm sure you all know, New Mexico is pretty distinctive in terms of its state statutes and the pretty restrictive standards to which it holds all law enforcement in the state before the legal authorization of vehicle pursuits, given their inherent danger. 2 of the cases from this period began as vehicle pursuits that the department wanted to take a second or third look at based on concerns that it had, and there were some sustained violations that came out of those cases. There were 2 other cases involving force that the department had concerns, and it has every use of force is going to be subjected to a certain level of supervisory review just to ensure that the force was justified, the force was in policy, that the officers are performing consistent with how they're being trained and what the department's expectations are. Out of the many, many uses of force that arise in a given period of time, as just a regular part of policing, there were 2 cases where the department said, hey, we have concerns about what was done here and we want to forward this on for further investigation. So Internal Affairs takes it from there and we look at those cases. And then 4 cases, the other 4 had to do with a range of things that were more administrative in nature, and a couple of cases involving investigative issues and the effectiveness or thoroughness of investigative work that was being done by the department. So along with the 12 internally generated cases, we had 3 cases that began as complaints from members of the public. Those, again, ranged in terms of what the particular concerns were. And so various allegations of misconduct were explored by the department in conjunction with that. And importantly, in that second item on this slide, one of the things that we have encouraged since the beginning of our time here, and I think the department has gotten to be very good at, is to not just stop at the 4 corners of the complaint from the member of the public, but once they get into a particular issue and they are reviewing it, if they discover something that the member of the public didn't bring this up, but as we are scrutinizing this, we're seeing somebody who is not complying with what our expectations are, and we'll go ahead and open what they call an ancillary investigation issue and pursue that, and again, oftentimes find some accountability for the involved officers as a result of that. So that willingness to kind of go beyond the complaint and to take it as an opportunity to really look at officer accountability in a comprehensive way is something that I think is important and a good sign. All right, I'm going to turn it over to Teresa to get into the kind of the specifics of the various cases that we looked at.
Before I get into this slide, I wanted to just highlight that we're grateful that we are in the process of renewing our contract with your city, so hopefully that process will move forward and we'll be able to continue our work here. One of the changes that is going to be in the next sort of contract iteration scope of work is that something that we heard voiced both from this body as well as from members of the public, which was concern that we perhaps were not seeing all of the investigations that LCPD was receiving, and that was most specifically around external complaints. So the department has 3 classification types, and you may have heard me speak about these before. But in the scope of work as it was in the first iteration of our contract, we were receiving those external complaints that rose to the level of possible misconduct and received a formal investigation by the department. There were 2 other complaint classifications, and those still remain in the department, and those will now become part of our scope of work for review. Those 2 other types, one is category 2, in which the member of the public who made the complaint determined after a conversation with a supervisor or with someone in internal affairs that he or she wished to withdraw their complaint. So the department categorizes and classifies that, it counts it, but it does not reach the level of a formal investigation. We will now receive those. The third type would be something that the department, upon review of the cursory review of either a supervisor or internal affairs, determined that the complaint was without merit. In other words, they watched the body-worn camera and said, that is dispositive, we don't need to do further investigation, we've cleared that case. That category 3 complaint will now come to us as well. So there was some concern that we weren't seeing the full breadth of complaints from members of the public, that the numbers were relatively small. And what was the department potentially hiding? Was there something we weren't seeing that we should be aware of? And that is now being remedied in the course of this next contract iteration. So just for information of this body as well as members of the public, the voices were heard and the contract was amended accordingly. So thank you for those who voiced those concerns and challenges. So let's jump into allegations. Steve spoke about kind of the high level of what we saw. There were 49 total allegations across the breadth of 15 cases. As he mentioned, the majority of these related to what the department and other law enforcement agencies call the code of conduct. So the type of conduct that is expected of a law enforcement officer. That's professionalism, that's use of professional language and not profanity, that's courtesy, so no discourtesy in the course of their engagement, and so on, trustworthiness, and so on. So the code of conduct tends to be a kind of an umbrella for a variety of different performance deficiencies that the department framed allegations around. We, of course, saw some excessive or unnecessary use of force allegations. As Steve spoke to, these are the category that we really want to take a look at closely, and the department has several layers of review for that. There were some allegations of violations of the pursuit policy. And then as Steve mentioned, in those ancillary issues, those were things like deficiencies in the report writing. Did the officer complete a robust report? Did it have anything missing in it? Was the body-worn camera activated appropriately in a timely way and for the duration of the call? Did the officer communicate using his or her radio according to policy and procedures? So those are the things that the department identified. And then we saw some off-duty potential misconduct, driving while under the influence, and other occurrences off-duty that the department framed and highlighted. Did I skip one? I did. All right, so outcomes, there were, of these allegations, 35 sustained. And the interesting piece of this is that the majority of the cases that we reviewed were already initiated by the department. So to have a large percentage sustained is not surprising to us. This is something that the department has already identified may be potential misconduct. They raise it to internal affairs for further review, and they find that, in fact, what they thought was potential misconduct really was, and so they sustain that allegation appropriately. 7 of these were exonerated, 6 were not sustained, and 1 was unfounded. And across all of these, we found that the outcomes were evidence-based, except for 1, where we found that the evidence was not quite as dispositive. So the investigation found in the department's occurrence that the allegation was exonerated, which means that it happened, but it did not violate policy. And in our review of the case, we found that it was maybe more appropriate to have found it to be not sustained, which means that there wasn't sufficient evidence either way. Now, that's a distinction a little bit at the margins. In that case, the officer was still held accountable for his actions, and so we found that overall that appropriate outcome was received if we disagreed on that particular nuance of the case. But we wouldn't be doing our job if we didn't find some areas of improvement, and that was one of them. Officer demographics, 22 LCPD employees named in the course of these investigations. 15 of them were officers, 3 sergeants, 2 detectives, and 2 non-sworn. And again, in our report, we list out the employees that are related to every case. So if you go through the report, there are some charts that show this case had 2 officers, this one had a sergeant and an officer, and so on. So if there's interest in digging deeper, that information is provided in our report. Discipline is always of paramount importance, of course. If you find that there is something that needs to be corrected, the department is correcting those. The sustained allegations had discipline that ranged from what's called a verbal reprimand to suspension, which means that the officers received days off for his or her sustained misconduct, and there was one case that resulted in termination. These all included a debrief or a training, irrespective of the finding. So if a case came to the attention of internal affairs in any way, those officers received some sort of counseling, information session, some kind of remediation so that they were both aware of what happened and any corrective action that they may have to take. And that's really responsive, we feel, in the system. And as we say here, the goal is correction with an eye towards performance in the future. Critical incidents, of course, of importance both to members of the community as well as to officer safety. We have seen a lot of progress in the department's response to these. It used to be the case that the administrative review would come 3, 4, sometimes 5 years after the incident occurred. That's highly unsatisfactory, both from a transparency perspective, but also from a corrective action perspective. Right now, this individual is out doing his or her job, and where is the administrative accountability? In this last cycle, we saw that they completed their critical incident review in 6 months. That, in our experience, having done this, throughout various jurisdictions, is a wonderful timeline. So we will definitely commend the department for that. We look forward to that progress going forward. One of the things I've talked about before at length is the Force Review Cadre. They are a group of subject matter experts in the department that evaluates critical incidents. We have highlighted their work before because it is extremely thorough. It is very well documented, and it locates and identifies a lot of ancillary issues that can be raised: equipment, training, things that officers need in the field, and so on. They are very comprehensive. The department does have other systems in place to conduct similar investigations. For example, they have a training debrief that looks at a critical incident and says, do we need more training after this? Do people need to learn, X, Y, or Z as a result of this? We have found that those are not as holistic, right? So the Force Review Cadre is looking at all of the things together. Unfortunately, their extraordinary success is also their downfall because they are very high demand. So these are subject matter experts that have other ancillary duties. The department has told us cannot evaluate every single use of force incident. We would like to see a world in which their use is more frequent and more regular. And so what we've recommended is that they be reviewing every critical incident at the very least. So we'd like to see that progress in the next cycles. One of the findings that we continue to see be a challenge, and this is not unique to Las Cruces or its department, respective to framing allegations with the individual types of misconduct that might be raised during a course of an investigation. We kind of get the department coming and going. At some points we say you have framed too many allegations and they're too nuanced and detailed. And at other times we say you've missed some allegations and we'd like to see you find all of them and potentially frame all of them. So again, it's one of these nuances that we'll just continue to iterate with the department on. We found that 2 cases in this period kind of missed the mark in terms of framing. In one, there was a missed opportunity to hold some supervisors accountable for their behavior. And so we'd like to see that, all levels of the rank the chain of command are held accountable. And in the other, we noted that the force review cadre's review was very robust and comprehensive, and then the IA investigation did not necessarily frame each of those components that the force review cadre had identified. So just an opportunity to have that certainty and progress throughout all of the administrative functions. Back to Steve. No, just kidding, still me. Performance challenges. We brought this up in our last reporting cycle when we were here last, in which we were identifying what we're calling performance challenges or enforcement errors, and trying to quantify these or qualify these in a phrase is difficult. But overall, these are things that we found officers were making mistakes in the field, is what it boils down to. One case that was particularly striking, officer had someone detained, put them in the rear of a police vehicle, didn't lock the door, and that person decided they were free to leave. So that to us falls into this category of enforcement error, in which the department identified and rose that to the level of an internal investigation. That officer was appropriately held accountable for that behavior. What we are most struck by, though, of course, in our work is looking for patterns or systemic deficiencies. Is it the same officer over and over again? Is it the same unit? Is it the same shift? Is it the same area? And we haven't found a pattern to say, this is a systemic deficiency. This is officers having an extremely taxing job and having perhaps bad days and making mistakes. Officers are obviously held to a much higher standard than many professions, and their mistakes can sometimes rise to the level of compromising public safety. So the department is appropriately holding them accountable for those types of misconduct issues. Now to Steve. He's going to talk about vehicle pursuit.
Okay, I knew I had one more slide in here somewhere. So I got this one. Vehicle pursuits happened, there were two cases, both of which happened to be mine in this cycle, so I'm the resident authority for the time being. The vehicle pursuit review process, I think, is a really important one in any organization just because of the risks associated with that activity. It was interesting in meeting with the department this morning. We were just kind of going over some year-over-year statistics, and the number of pursuits initiated by the department in a given year has dropped significantly in response to the very restrictive new standards based on the New Mexico state statute. Having said that, of the pursuits that did occur last year, I think there were maybe 7 or 8 of them in the last cycle. 2 of them were referred on to internal affairs for possible violations of policy. The department has a number of very, very specific, kind of complicated policies that relate to various aspects of the pursuit, and they really do impose a lot of significant expectations on officers in terms of initiating the pursuit, keeping supervision informed, when to stop, how to follow. All of those things are pretty carefully regulated. And the department is going to, every time there's a pursuit, the department is going to go through a first-level review process of its own. In 2 of the cases, they went ahead and referred those on to internal affairs because they thought there were possible policy violations in terms of how the pursuit was conducted. And interestingly enough, in one of them, the internal affairs folks did a deeper dive into the allegations, and they determined that one of the things that the department had initially been concerned about, the officer actually had a very plausible and persuasive justification for when he was interviewed a little bit more specifically and thoroughly. He provided some information that was missing from their understanding, and they determined that he was exonerated for that piece of it. And then again, as we saw in other cases, that same case resulted in a couple of sustained findings. One for officers related to their body camera activation, their failure to activate when they were expected to at a certain phase of the whole encounter. And 2, A third officer who got involved in the pursuit without authorization was also found that he had violated policy and received a consequence accordingly. So we were just impressed with some of the nuance of it, and again, the deep dive that the department was willing to take. And in the second case, it involved a supervisor who had initiated the pursuit himself mistakenly, as it turned out. I think he was a little unclear on some of the specific parameters of the department's evolving policy. That was particularly significant, obviously, in and of itself, but because it was a supervisor also. And so, again, the department did a good job of exploring that, holding the relevant supervisor accountable, and making sure that any training or other kinds of remedial measures for him and other officers were getting implemented so that people are understanding on a going forward basis what the rules of engagement are. And then the last thing I want to talk about really relates to this concept of off-duty conduct. We've talked about it before, or earlier today, and we've mentioned it in the past. It is, again, pretty distinctive to policing that off-duty conduct issues are subject to the review and scrutiny and the accountability measures of the employer, in this case, the city and the police department. We have noticed that the department's willingness to engage in these issues, we've seen more examples of it as we've gone along, and I don't think that's necessarily a sign that the officers are acting out off duty to a greater extent, but the department is more locked in on the issue and more willing to bring people to account when things come to the department's attention. And as the slide says, importantly, we're also not seeing trend lines in terms of, wow, we have a lot of instances of driving under the influence, for example, and is there something that the department needs to be doing more systemically or across the agency to address this particular issue? We're not seeing a through line in some of the conduct that is being scrutinized to the point where it's suggesting a greater level of, or a broader level of remediation than whatever's being done for that officer. And last but not least, that whole idea of support mechanisms as well. As we've said on a number of occasions, a very, very small percentage of these internal affairs cases, these misconduct investigations, a tiny percentage of even the sustained ones result in the officer being separated from the department. That has happened, it does happen. We've seen it happen in Las Cruces since we have started working here. There have been officers that have been let go because the nature of their conduct is so egregious. But the overwhelming majority of the time, it's hey, you're still going to be our employee when this is over. So the object of the game is not to punish you in this process. It's to educate you, adjust your behavior, correct your behavior, and make sure that you understand on a going forward basis what our expectations are so that this doesn't recur. And when it comes to off-duty conduct, obviously there are a lot of causes for people to get into inappropriate situations off duty, and the department has gotten, I think, they've taken a very effective approach at looking at these things holistically and making sure that if there are potential emotional, mental health, behavioral, substance, whatever the case may be, that they are not just responding by making sure that the person is being held accountable and given a week-long suspension or something, but also that they're getting access to the support that they might need that gave rise to the conduct in the first place. And last but not least, community outreach was added to our scope of work 2 or 3 years ago as an additional component. We've had, I think, 3 sessions that 2 of them were here, and I think one of them was out at a neighborhood location. And in all 3 instances, there's a pretty good turnout of people, certainly compared to what we see in other places. Where we do this same kind of work. We were kind of struck by the level of engagement, and a lot of it turned into Q&A sorts of things that were very useful feedback for us. So that concept of community outreach is continuing for us in the next contract. we are going to pilot a new concept that we've done in some other places. We'll try it within the next couple of weeks and see how it lands here in Las Cruces. And if it doesn't take, we'll just kind of go back to the drawing board. But we have had success in other places offering virtual sessions where we're obviously in our location, but people can kind of dial in, or webinar sort of format, Zoom, whatever the platform might be, and participate in that way. And we have seen in some of our jurisdictions that it increases the turnout. People, it's a lot more convenient for somebody to just go into their den and turn this on for a half hour rather than trying to get down to City Hall at a particular place and time. And it's an opportunity for us to engage with people in a new way. So we were meeting with the city this morning about some of the mechanisms of that. And again, we're hopeful that this pilot program will be a success. It's not going to be every time. We're certainly going to have our in-person community outreach sessions in the future as well. But we're just experimenting with some different things as we try to continue to get community feedback, and the sessions that we've had so far have been helpful to us. And I think that's all that we have, but certainly, obviously, we're happy to answer any questions that you folks might have, and once again, we thank you for having us. Oh, and I'm sorry, the last thing I'll say is just to be sure, one of the things that in the different jurisdictions that we work at or with, one of the concerns that elected officials or members of the public will sometimes have is, what's the level of cooperation from the department itself? Is it this adversarial thing where it's pulling teeth to get the information that we need to do our job? And I think we've said this before, and we're happy to note it again. The department has certainly held up its end of the bargain since we started this process. They're very good about notifying us, providing us with everything we need. And I would say the majority of the time, we will have a follow-up question or concern. We'll want clarification about something, and the department is very, very responsive in terms of making sure that we have everything that we need to do our job. They may not agree with us 100% of the time in terms of our perspective or insights or recommendations, but the engagement is always, I think, very open-minded, and it's a good dialogue. And if we very occasionally agree to disagree, it's at least coming from a place of understanding. So thank you, and again, any questions you have, we're happy to answer.
Thank you. Councilor Harris?
Thanks, Mayor. So, thanks for the presentation. I read through, at least scanned through most of the report. It's very thorough, so I'm going to dive much deeper into it and get to know things that happened before my time here. And I would also like to thank the police department for cooperating so fully and for being, at least compared to a lot of other departments that we all read about in the news, I think they're taking this stuff seriously and really trying to instigate some change. Obviously, there are improvements that could be made, but I do appreciate the willingness to go along with this process. So I have a few questions and comments. One, I agree with your finding and recommendation that critical incident reviews should be completed for every single incident. I think that is not negotiable. I mean, to me, in any other industry, in industrial safety, in aviation, medical, every single incident gets reviewed. And if we don't have the resources to do it, we need to get the resources, make them available. Every single one needs to be reviewed and reviewed quickly. And in a way, obviously internally we're trying to make things better, not necessarily place blame on any one person and then seek to discipline them. This is a big theme in industrial safety in particular, and aviation, is that we're not trying to find the person who didn't tighten the bolt. We're trying to find, why did the system allow the bolt to not be tightened? Let's see. So there's that. And I'll also, echo the thought that, police officers are held to a high standard, and they have to be. If I have a bad day at my job, that sucks. Maybe I get fired. Maybe I piss somebody off. But I don't carry a gun and interact with the public. And so, really, yes, held to a high standard. You have to be. Your bad day could be somebody's last day, right? That's just the reality of things. And so I'm curious, I guess with that in mind, have you seen, so over the last 9 years, we've been implementing new policies and things. Have you seen changes in how the report, in how these incidents have, I guess maybe not necessarily been addressed, but like the types of incidents we have? So 9 years ago, we had X number of incidents, and they had some severity. Through all of the things that you've been recommending over the last 9 years, like, have we been implementing these policies? Have they been resulting in real change? And I'll let you speak to that, and I have a couple follow-ups.
So, Mr. Mayor and Councilmember Harris, thank you so much for the questions. I wanted to just clarify on critical incidents, just a point of clarification, that all incidents are reviewed. They do receive several levels, different groups within the department will review them, and they ultimately all result in an internal investigation, so an IA, internal affairs investigation. What the nuance that we're suggesting, recommending, is that it is this force review cadre, which is a specialized unit, conduct yet another layer of review. So just for clarification, all critical incidents are receiving at least some level of fairly rigorous review. So I just wanted to clarify that. As to your last question, I think that there's two sides of it. One is we are looking at individual officer performance and conduct, and the extent that we are tracking the types of the names and the actual personalities that are coming across our desk. We are gratified to see that we're not seeing a lot of recurring offenders. There's not a lot of trends in terms of, boy, we see this guy every quarter. So as far as remediation working on the individual level, I can't say whether it's because of that process or this process that he or she shifted behavior, but certainly it's implied, and any training that was received. On a systemic level, the department, for the most part, agrees with our recommendations. Where they go from there, we've seen changes in terms of the process, the administrative process, spinning up reviews for this type of off-duty conduct. We weren't seeing that, 5 years ago, prior to Chief Story's tenure. And so we're seeing that the department is holding officers more frequently accountable through these internal mechanisms than we have in the past.
Okay, that's great to know. Have you, and I don't know if this is maybe a comment about our specific department or just kind of more, I think this is more a question for your experience in general. But are there certain disciplinary actions that you have seen us take that are better than other departments do, or worse than other departments do? And do you provide specific guidance on, in this instance, we think that this behavior warranted a different kind of punishment? Specifically, I read a couple individual reports from last year maybe, and between them, it kind of struck me as one of these is worse than the other, but the one that was less worse, in my mind, like warranted a demotion, and I was like, this seems disproportionate.
So I'll say a couple things. One is it is absolutely something that we look at. If there are sustained allegations, we are certainly curious to know what the department's response is, and does it seem commensurate with the severity of the allegation. It can be, we keep our description of it in terms of public reporting at a pretty high level as opposed to getting to the weeds. Mm-hmm. We will occasionally talk to the department and have the same reaction you do, not necessarily why this seemed worse than this and why did this get a different, lesser punishment. But in an individual case, we might say we would have expected the consequence for this to be more significant, and then just have that conversation. The other piece of it is that there are some different variables that can account besides the specific policy violation. Are you a repeat offender? Are you a supervisor who should have known better, or a brand new officer? And I think the biggest key to your point about actually fixing or correcting, as opposed to just giving somebody 2 days off and teaching them a lesson, I think the idea of that the department has really leaned into, it's really almost every case that is sustained, and some that aren't even sustained. The department is going to follow up and in an outside of the discipline process, address the underlying behavior, performance issue, and really try to give the officer the tools to make sure it doesn't happen again. So I think there is an evolution in that respect.
Okay. Yeah, and I appreciate the mention in the presentation also that there were incidents where you found that supervisors should have been paying attention to this, because the leadership really does come from the top and flow down. The last question/comment I have is I was reading the report, and there was a note that the zip code sample was kind of iffy, and the main reason is that most of the reports originated from internal affairs, which is in zip code 88001, shockingly. So I don't know, do you have any recommendations on different ways that we could geographically map these things, by patrol routes or council districts, or I don't know, other things, statistics that we might be interested in?
Yeah, absolutely. And one of the things that we've tried to do more recently is look at the underlying police report, so not rely on the memo that says, the complainant is the police department in 88001. So we look at who was involved, where was it happening, and we're using that zip code more regularly. And what I think we need to do is go back over the course of 5 years and input that data instead. So certainly we'll be able to have a little more mapping in the future. We'll go back and do that work.
Cool, yeah. That would be appreciated. And the zip codes in particular in Cruces are weird and mixed, yes, mixed to say the least. So I don't know if we might have better geographic descriptors. That's a question further to go on, but I think that's it. Thank you very much for the presentation and entertaining all my questions.
And as you're digesting previous reports, if there's any questions, do feel free to reach out to us, and we'll be able to respond. Yeah.
Thank you. Mayor? I notice there's 2 red lights. Shall we give it to the lady first?
Oh, I was waiting. Councilor Harris, are you done?
Oh, yes, I am. Thank you, Mayor.
Yeah, Councilor Corain, go.
Thank you. Sorry, it's a brief one, so don't worry. I'll give you a chance.
You're always brief.
Thank you for your presentation, and thank you to LCPD for continuing this ongoing work. And again, forgive me, as my day job is as a professor, so I'm a little sensitive on this topic. But you mentioned in 2 separate reports, and I noticed these when they were coming through earlier, that the use of generative AI to write reports is maybe leading to some problematic things, and or at least not allowing for a clear narration of what people experienced in that might be problematic, and understanding the implications of whatever happens. I'm wondering if you can talk a little bit about if what you're seeing other departments do in this context, and or if LCPD, I think this has come up within about the last year since we started using this new technology, and I understand report writing is terrible, but I also don't want us to miss things or have things be glazed over by AI because it's rosy or whatever the situation is, which seems like might have been the case in some of those things.
Yeah, thank you very much for that question. We're at the cusp of something new at every morning. So this is a work in progress, I think, for agencies nationwide. And certainly there's that balance, because report writing takes an extraordinary amount of time. And officers are often tied to that desk writing a report versus being in the field. Supervisors, same thing, tied to the desk, reviewing, checking that report. And so I think this is one of those Pandora box that we opened, and officers have access to it. And if we were to take it away, they would probably not be very happy to have to go back to the type of report writing they were doing. I think the important part is to have really strict guardrails and very close review. And so we're really leaning, or departments are really leaning on supervisors to be doing thorough reviews of those reports. Does this make sense? Is it something that is comprehensive, and so on? Axon, which is the main vendor of this report writing software, although there are various, but Axon is the one most frequently used. It's packaged in with the body-worn camera contract typically. And they have a lot of safeguards in place in order to kind of test the officer and the supervisor to make sure that they've reviewed the report. They'll put in things that are completely wild and out of left field to make sure that those are reviewed. They have been developing safeguards over the course of the year. As new things come up, they're putting up something to help remediate it. But certainly it's something that we just have to keep looking at. And I think this is just the new world that we live in, not just for law enforcement, but all around. So we'll keep looking at it.
Thank you. No, this is one of those situations where I don't trust the people that made the problem to fix the problem. So I feel a little like, so I hope that we can
and me both.
be very proactive in thinking about this, because I don't want it, I'm not proposing that we get rid of it, even though I tell my students, you get dumber when you use it. I understand the context that it's in and the value that it has. I just don't want it to be something that interferes with your work, with our understanding of accountability, and can actually help make things better for the force. So thank you, and I look forward to hearing any other interesting updates that might come around related to that.
Absolutely, thank you.
Councilor Matisse.
Yeah, thank you, Mayor. You represent quite a lot of cities and different police departments. So this question, you touched on a very important segment several times, and that is making a police force better, that is training, equipment, and tools. And it was throughout your entire presentation. So my question to you and recommendation maybe from you, because you are experts, we're thinking of developing and building a new training center. Do you see that the correlation? Do you work with police departments and other cities where they build a state-of-the-art modern training center, that it's an improvement in the quality and the recruiting of the policemen? It's a tough question for you to answer, but I just wanted your opinion.
So thank you for the question. I would say, broadly speaking, it absolutely makes a difference in so many ways. I think just in terms of morale, it is very affirming and a source of enthusiasm for officers to have a place to go for training that is of a really high quality. And I think there are a lot of dividends that can arise from it. And as you noted, and we appreciate that, we are huge proponents of looking at these things holistically. And you can unpack what happened on this specific day, and did this person do this instead of that. But that's all, you have to look at the broader context of how these people are being trained, how effective the training is, and what tools are they being given. And I think a robust training program is absolutely essential to an agency that's operating at the highest potential level. And to your point, more specifically, a quality training facility absolutely is a positive factor in that whole process.
Thank you.
Mayor Pro Tem.
Thanks, Mayor. And this may be more of a question for our city manager. I'm curious if we're able to talk about the new contract. And if we are, I'm just curious about, is there anything changing in it that you can discuss now? And when do we expect it to come to council? And if we can't talk about it right now, that's okay too. Just curious.
Hello, Mayor Pro Tem, and City Council, Canton Biao, City Manager. That's not on the agenda, unfortunately, so we can't talk, but thank you for asking.
Okay, well, I'll ask you later, I guess. Thank you.
Mayor Pro Tem.
Thank you, Mayor, City Councilors. And thank you, Mr. Colony and Ms. Magula, for the presentation and Thank you to the police department for cooperating with the review. I have a question and a request. So Viola or Christine, when will this be available for public review or consumption, or will it be this report? Christina, Viola would be. Thank you.
Mr. Mayor, Mayor Pro Tem Munoz, as soon as we finish today's council meeting, I'll have Christine posted on our transparency page.
Perfect, thank you, appreciate it. The other piece, I'd like to add a little more science or a little more math to the presentation. I haven't read the contract, so I'm not sure if this is within scope or not, and maybe DC would end that's probably us as a police department and the city, but so I would just like some comparative data. So police has about 158,000 calls per year or so, give or take. So in Six Sigma, we call this defects. Or errors or anomalies, right? And so what I would like to do is just, how did we do this year versus last year versus 5 years ago? How are we doing in comparison to cities our size? So if that's within your scope and you can provide that, I would love to see the progress or regress, and if not, maybe we could figure something internally to look at data like that.
Yeah, Mayor Pro Tem, I really appreciate that. I think one of the challenges in framing it that way, although we absolutely can do that, and we've looked over the past years as well to see, relative to calls for service, what is the percentage of complaints. One of the things that is challenging about it is that as a system becomes more effective, we might see an increase, and we have seen an increase in the number going up, right? So over time, and in particular over the past 2 years, we've seen an increase in internal investigations being launched. Why is that? Are officers actually engaged in more misconduct, or is the department now taking the view that these issues need to be documented, formally investigated, formally addressed, right? So sometimes when we see those increases, it is not necessarily indicative of something happening worse or going south or being more deficient, but just a sign of a healthy system. But we can certainly provide those figures. I do like math, much to Steve's disappointment.
Thank you, Mayor.
Anyone else? Okay, again, thank you. Thank you for being here. Thank you for the presentation. I just want to add that anytime that you raise your right hand and you take an oath, you're held to a higher standard. And anything that you say, how you behave, how you conduct yourself is always going to be scrutinized. So I thank Chief Story, the deputy chiefs, the police department for being willing to cooperate and give in order to get better. Yeah. Because as a law enforcer, as a code enforcer, it's always hard to be audited. And to embrace it, it really takes a lot of, I would say, professionalism, maturity to say, what is it that we're doing wrong? How can we do it better? And you still keep adding to it, so that's good, from external to the categories to the cleared cases, so that we can review everything and get better, because that's what we want, is the best public safety we can get in the best department that the outcome can come out. So again, thank you for all that you do, and we look forward to seeing how we can get better.
Thank you.
Thanks. Okay, I'll look for a motion to adjourn.
Motion to adjourn? Oh, sorry. Second.
This is on the motion to adjourn the work session. Councillor McClure?
Yes.
Councillor Matisse?
Yes.
Councillor Harris?
Yes.
Councillor Bencomo?
Yes.
Councillor Coran?
Yes.
Councillor Munoz?
Yes.
And Mayor?
Yes.